Hey, let's face it, almost everyone, all businesses, commercial operations, industrial and manufacturing facilities, government facilities, schools, and even medical facilities like hospitals generate hazardous waste. Some generate a lot, some generate a little. That means all of these facilities are subject to the RCRA, or Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, rules and regulations. And there's a lot of regulations, and they're not normally clear or easily found. One of the most common problems we see at regulated hazardous waste generating facilities, which is almost everyone, when we do hazardous waste inspections or audits, or even when we're just walking through a facility, is bad or incorrect labeling of containers holding hazardous waste, or far too often, labels completely missing. Labeling waste properly isn't always clear or simple, and sometimes it's not very intuitive. But it is a legal requirement under the federal and state RCRA regulations that protect your team, the environment, and your bottom line. So if you're unsure of your labeling requirements, let's break down the most common types of waste labels, what they're for, and how to use them the right way. Let's start with possibly the most important labels, hazardous waste labels. Hazardous waste labels identify containers holding waste that meets EPA or state definitions for having hazardous characteristics like flammability, toxicity, corrosivity, or reactivity, or which is a waste type specifically listed under RCRA. When should you use these hazardous waste labels? Labels must be applied to hazardous waste containers as soon as hazardous waste is first added to a container. Waiting until it's full or nearly full is a common and costly mistake. Again, to repeat, these labels must be used on the hazardous waste container as soon as hazardous waste is first added to the container. What does the hazardous waste label have to say? Well, first of all, the words hazardous waste must be clearly indicated. And you can see they are on this example of a hazardous waste label. You must include a clear description of the contents of the container, such as spent solvent mixture. You must include an accumulation start date, and that is the exact date when waste was first placed in the container. More on this in a minute. You have to include the generator name and address. That's probably you watching the video, and likely is your company, not you personally. And the applicable waste codes. For example, D001 for ignitable hazardous waste, for the hazardous materials in the container. Let's be clear on this. What is an accumulation start date? This is the date you first begin storing hazardous waste in the container. From this date, the clock starts ticking on how long you can legally store the waste before it must be shipped off-site for disposal. For many generators, this window is 90 or 180 days, depending upon your generator status. Hazardous waste violations, especially for missing labels or dates, are one of the most frequently cited issues during hazardous waste inspections. Labels help ensure proper handling, prevent dangerous mistakes, and prove that you're staying within legal storage timeframes. Used oil labels identify containers holding used lubricants, engine oils, hydraulic fluids, or other similar oils collected for recycling or disposing under the EPA's used oil management standards. When should you use a used oil label? You should label containers immediately upon adding used oil, whether they be drums, tanks, or other collection containers. Your labels must include the words used oil. Don't label it as waste oil unless it's been contaminated and can't be recycled. Mislabeling used oil as waste oil may trigger stricter hazardous waste rules. Now know that there are some states that call used oil waste oil, but for most of us in the United States, it's used oil, not waste oil. Clear used oil labeling ensures that the material is handled under streamlined recycling rules, while improper labeling can lead to misclassification, fines, or more intensive disposal procedures. Next are labels for a certain class of hazardous wastes, which fall under streamlined rules and which are usually recycled. These are universal waste labels. Universal wastes include items like batteries, mercury-containing thermostats and switches, fluorescent bulbs, otherwise known as lamps, and certain pesticides. Note that in some states, used oil, but not waste oil, is also considered a universal waste. These are regulated hazardous wastes, but they're managed under relaxed handling and storage rules. When should you use the universal waste label? Apply labels when the item becomes waste, such as when a bulb burns out or a battery is spent. What this label must include? The words universal waste and identify the type. For example, universal wastes, lamps, which is a technical waste wording, fancy way of saying bulbs. The accumulation start date is required, and again, that's the day the item was first discarded or collected for disposal. Proper labeling keeps you eligible for the simplified rules under the Universal Waste Program. Missing or incorrect labels may result in your waste being reclassified and regulated under more stringent hazardous waste requirements. A quick note, some of these universal wastes can become regulated as hazardous wastes if they are broken or otherwise mishandled or damaged. This is clearly the case with lamps, or bulbs, which must not be broken and which cannot be mixed with regular ordinary solid waste, like you might put into a dumpster. One of the most common waste violations we see, and this one is an easy no-brainer, is broken fluorescent light bulbs, or lamps in waste jargon, in the trash dumpster behind a building. If you have that, you are certainly going to get written up and get a violation for that, so don't let that happen to you. Another commonly used label is the Non-Hazardous waste label. These labels are for waste that isn't classified as hazardous waste, but still needs to be clearly marked for storage, transport, or recycling. When should you use these? You should apply these when storing any kind of non-hazardous waste on site in containers prior to disposal or shipment. This could apply to regular solid waste, trash, and any other non-hazardous waste materials. Labeling is usually optional, but a great waste management practice. These labels should include the words non-hazardous waste, a description of contents, an accumulation date is optional but is a great practice, the intended disposal method or destination, again optional but very helpful to include. These labels help prevent accidental mixing with hazardous waste and keep your site organized and compliant. Even if the waste isn't regulated the same way, clear labeling helps your team and inspectors know what's what at a glance. Finally, there are labels for when you're in the process of determining if an unknown waste is hazardous or not. These are called the waste characterization labels. These labels identify containers holding waste materials that have not yet been confirmed as either hazardous or non-hazardous. When should you use them? You should apply these labels when a new waste stream is generated and you're still waiting on lab results or applying generator knowledge to determine how it must be managed. What should the label include? The words pending waste characterization or similar, and a description of suspected contents, the generation date, and the person responsible for sampling and testing. You might be wondering, what is waste characterization? Waste characterization is the process of determining whether a waste meets the definition of hazardous waste under federal or state law. This might involve lab analysis, safety data sheets or SDS review, or knowledge of the materials and processes used. Until you know for sure, the safest and most compliant approach is to label the container clearly and treat it cautiously. Properly identifying and labeling waste during this gray zone period helps prevent mishandling. It also protects you if you're ever questioned during an inspection, showing you had a process in place and we're working in good faith to comply. One thing we here at RMA really stress is that facilities can't let waste labeling be an afterthought. Waste labeling is often treated as an administrative task. In reality, it's one of the simplest and most visible signs of whether your facility is operating compliantly. Labels protect your team, support inspections, and help ensure that the right waste goes to the right place at the right time. It's one of the first things inspectors look for, and unfortunately one of the most commonly cited violations facilities get. Easy to overlook, but easy to do it correctly and compliantly. Stay out of trouble, label everything. A final word on hazardous waste labeling. Labels should be affixed to hazardous waste containers so that they can be seen. That doesn't mean they should be on the back side of the container or hidden from view or unclear or in illegible handwriting. All of these labels need to be visible, clearly written, up to date, and replaced when necessary. They should be part of your regular, usually monthly or greater, inspections of hazardous waste storage areas at your location. Don't overlook these simple steps. For almost everyone, waste labels start with finding somewhere to order them online, and luckily, they're available in a lot of places. But to make it easy, we've included some links below to direct you to some labels our customers have found to fit their needs. So we've saved you the trouble of doing your own online search. Check them out and order whatever you might need. So whether you need hazardous waste compliance assistance, training, or a complete waste labeling system, RMA can help. We work with facilities across the country to simplify waste compliance and reduce risk. We'll walk through your setup, identify what's missing, and help you build a waste management and labeling system that works. Reach out to us by email, by phone, or just schedule a time to chat with us here on our website. Either way, we'd be happy to help you become a fully compliant waste management and labeling superstar. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.